I was asked to present about the flow system because of the book that Bastian and Marco have sponsored the translation together with Joshua from Eros, I think is how you pronounce that, maybe. So this is the original flow system book that John Turner and myself and our other colleague Brian Rivera wrote. And this is now the Italian translation. That's available out there. If you've got a copy, you want us to sign it, please just ask us. But I want to talk a little bit about the flow system. This is the three of us when we wrote the book, and we signed it. You'll notice that John's champagne is a little clear. John doesn't drink alcohol, so I drank his. So this is when we sign it. This is the flow guide in Italian. This is on our website, flowguides.org, translated by Marco and Bastian and others that supported them. Bastian also did the Dutch version of the flow guide as well, which is on there. And of course, this is the new book. So I'm deeply grateful to them for their investment, not only in this conference and making this possible, but also in making the translation of the book into Italian. It's the first non-English translation. The next one will be Hungarian, and I'm working with Lean Institute Colombia on the Spanish version, so fingers crossed on that. All right, let's get moving. So I thought I'd start by talking about what Lean is, because we heard Richard, Professor Keegan, talk about Lean. I think Lean is just behaviors, but I'm happy with the principles thing. So this is the Toyota production system, the people who created it. We've got this sort of pillar of Jidoka, which we'll get into a little bit later, just in time, and some key principles at the bottom, and these are the people who are responsible for all that happening. This is the customer first promise in 1946, I believe, if I remember rightly. In May 1946, Toyota declared that the customer should always come first. So this became part of the principle of the flow system. 1946, remember Japan in 1946? Customer first. So a big principle there. Lean comes along a few years later. Richard mentioned Dan Jones together with Jim Womack. They published Machine That Changed the World in 1990. The follow-up book, Lean Thinking, came in 1996. Of course, you will hear from John Shook this afternoon about some of the roots of Lean and his thoughts on Lean and Toyota, because he is also somebody who was very well known in Toyota. So this is where Lean came from. The word Lean came from this guy. This is John Krafcik. He was a Toyota guy at one time. He was the chairman, or sorry, the CEO of Google's autonomous driving division. And he came up with the word Lean when they were writing a paper for the Sloan Business Review. So that's where the word Lean comes from. And it was to describe Toyota's management system. That's their words. Taiichi Ohno, the key architect of Lean, he talked about Lean being the fundamental, or the total elimination of waste. That's what he talked about. Let's talk about what waste is. So waste, this Japanese word, and Richard said don't use Japanese words, but now we're using a Japanese word, muda, meaning waste. These are some examples of what we call type 1 waste. These are the types of waste that we want to eliminate. They seem to be essential, but we have to change business techniques. We need technological advancements if we want to eliminate them. And there's some examples of what's on there. The other type of waste is what we do all the time, which is things that have no value, which we can eliminate immediately. And of course, Lean broke these down into 8 specific categories. The underutilization of talent being added later. The first 7 sort of came out of Toyota. Okay, so this is a bit of grounding in Lean. This is what muda means. This Japanese word, and this is why it's important if you use Japanese words to understand the true meaning of them, because muda doesn't just mean waste. It means things are senseless or meaningless, and it's actually about our lack of professionalism leading to unnecessary costs. Okay, that was Lean. So you all know what Lean is now. Good. What's Agile? Because we heard Professor Furlan talking about Lean and Agile, and I've had many conversations about this. Agile is a philosophy. It's just a philosophy. The Agile Manifesto 2001, just a philosophy. You can choose to follow it, align to it, that's all it is. Scrum doesn't make you agile. Scrum is a planning tool. I'm a professional Scrum trainer. It's a planning tool. Doesn't make you agile, but you can use it to achieve some outcomes that might lead to agility. The other thing that Dave Snowden and I often talk about, and I'm being careful to avoid things that Dave will mention about me when he gets on this stage in about 40 minutes, is the agile or the lean agile mindset is pseudoscience, okay? It's pseudoscience, which means it's fake, it's not real. Everybody talks about getting the lean and the agile mindset, but actually what we have is a personal view of the world, and Dwight, who came up with the whole growth mindset, she says it's a series of self-perceptions or beliefs. So it's an individual thing. You can't have a group mindset. So when everybody says you just need the agile mindset, you just need the lean mindset, they're talking stupidly. This is not something that we try and push. Now, this is Dwight's work on it, and she said it's about self-belief and not some imposed mental model or forced way of thinking. A growth mindset emerges and cannot be forced into being. So you can't force people to have a mindset. The problem with mindsets, and this is some research that Professor Turner, my colleague, was doing, if you focus on one mindset today, our focus remains fixated on that point. But everything evolves over time, and so therefore we end up being stuck here, and we focus on these stable and fixed components and not the processes that produce them. And this is what's evolving and where we need to focus. But that's assuming a mindset is even a real thing, because as I say, it's considered pseudoscience. Mindsets, if they do exist, are individual. They emerge. They cannot be shared. They're not a shared construct. So if you have a mindset, it's your self-belief, the way you process the inputs, the triggers, the events, the world around you. If you're familiar with something worked by John Boyd called the OODA loop, it's about the way that we have been nurtured, our nature, our nurture, our experiences, all these things that are implicit to ourselves that may emerge. So even if they're real, and I had a cognitive neuroscientist tell me that she can prove that they're not real, but even if they are real, they're individual. So we need to move away from forcing people, stop using the phrase, you just need to have the right mindset. Okay, this is based on some work Dave did, so he can't tell me off on this one. But so Dave talks about emergence, not imposition, not forcing something. Enable the emergence of mindsets and do not impose or force a doctrine. So change the processes within your organization, change the interactions between people in the system, the agents in the system, the machines, the technology. Disturb the equilibrium. Shake things up a little bit, and of course encourage the good and discourage the bad. Okay, what's the connection between lean and agile? Because I'm going somewhere with this. So in the 50s, Toyota developed the Toyota production system. It's sort of said to have continued to develop to about 1975, the initial implementation. And as Richard said, things are evolving continuously. They're always looking for how they can improve. Then in 1995, Scrum comes along. In 1996, something called extreme programming, some methods and techniques for building software. And in 2001, these people get together, 17 men for some reason, no women, I apologize. It was earlier in the 90s, and they write the Agile Manifesto. That's the link between them. So, I told you what lean is, I told you what agile is. What's agility? So agility is an emergent property of the way we do the work and the way we behave towards the work and towards each other. So it's an emergent property. You can't just go and buy agile or do agile. You can follow a philosophy, but agility is slightly different. It emerges. So let's talk about what I think levels of agility are. Business agility, we talk about this a lot now. The pandemic was the big example of business agility. How fast can you adapt to changes and external events that have been forced upon you? Nothing to do with Scrum, nothing to do with Agile manifestos. How fast can you adapt, change, evolve, change direction? This is business agility. You then got product agility, which is how fast can you change your products and services? How fast can you deliver the features, the functions, the capabilities they need? And what about these unarticulated needs? How quickly do you discover what your customer wants before they know what they want? That's product agility. Then we get down into this team agility thing. This is being able to respond rapidly to emerging requirements, new requirements, new requests, surprises. So if you're a team and your organization says we're changing direction, how fast can you respond to that? How fast can your department, division, organizational unit respond and start operating like that? And then finally, your individual agility, which is nothing to do with exercise or anything, but this is about how adaptable are you? How willing are you to be flexible, to change how you do what you do for the benefit of your team and for the organization and the customers and society beyond that? Okay, so then I sort of did a little bit about this. Richard talked about PDCA earlier, and now I've got to put an O in the middle for observe. But if you look at PDCA, this is lean, Toyota. In fact, Toyota didn't invent PDCA. You have a gentleman in the audience you may find and have a conversation with later on called Charlie Protzman, talk about his grandfather and the origin of PDCA in post-World War II Japan. But look at Scrum. It's the same thing. This has just got a few extra bells and whistles. So I started looking at this, and I thought a few years ago, I came up with this thing called Scrum the Toyota Way, which is what I was known for in Toyota, teaching this. I created it within Toyota. So TPS, Toyota Production System, or Lean, I sort of focus on building the product right. Great products, high quality, and great longevity. But then what about the right product? You're building the product right. What about the right product? I can build you a television that's got 8K resolution, will have a 20-year lifespan. I'll sell it you for 100 euros. Fantastic sound, fantastic picture. Interested? But it only has pictures in black and white. You see, so agility is about meeting the customer's expectation. That's the Tesla-Toyota comparison. Tesla doesn't make great cars, but they make great products. Where Toyota makes great cars, they don't always make great products. It's all it's all within the perception of the customer. All right, and so I combined these. I added Scrum in here, which is just a planning system with an empirical feedback loop. And I started saying you can be lean without agile, you can be agile without being lean. Ideally, you want to be both lean and agile. And you've heard from experts already today the differences between those. So I brought these together, and then I made a movie. I thought I'd play this movie because some of you may not have seen it. And Dave likes this movie because Dave's in this movie, an earlier version of his work. But anyway, I'm going to hit this. It's a 3-minute film. I think you might enjoy it. Then I'll talk a bit more about the flow system. Let's try that. Put the mic on. So that was a film we made a couple of years ago. Toyota may have paid for that. I can't remember now. Anyway, we made, and so I started to look at what I'd done with Scrum the Toyota Way, and then started to deal with clever people who knew a lot more about things than me, so people like Professor Snowden, Professor Turner, and others, and started to understand things. And I thought, you know, what's missing here is actually a combination of things. Everybody's like, I do Scrum, 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 Scrum. I'm lean, lean, lean. What about bringing everything together? So let's talk a little bit about what I think flow is. Dave may have a different opinion when he comes on in a little while. But so the first thing is, flow is not a replacement for Agile. There's no such thing as a flow master. And if people start, there's lots of crazy terms coming up on LinkedIn now. So flow is not a replacement for Agile. It's not a framework. That's the next thing. It's also not a methodology. Flow is not a methodology. It's not a tool. It's not a prescription. So we don't go to our expensive consultancy and ask them for a prescription to be flow, if McKinsey's listening. We the Flobians, it's not a manifesto either. There's all sorts of nonsense out there on the internet about what flow is. It's also not an annual certification fee. We need to stop these people selling you PDF certificates every year. Although I might give you one on Thursday and Friday if you come to the training. But I hate all this annual certification thing. Flow is a construct, so it's an idea or theory containing various conceptual elements. You can read the rest on the screen. So it's a construct, it's this idea. As an individual construct, this is Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. I apologize to the translators. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, he passed away this year, but he was an Hungarian-American professor who first wrote this book on flow, all about flow in psychology and about being in the zone. And one of the things I often talk to companies about is how do you get your people in the zone where nothing else matters? Everything is invisible to them except what they're achieving. You see great athletes do this. It's known as being in the zone. So this is flow as an individual construct. As a social construct, it comes from the interactions with others when structure and practice, so the methods, the tools, the techniques and approaches you're using don't matter, very much like what Richard was talking about, where actually we just go do things and we solve challenges, we solve problems. This is flow as a social construct. These aren't by any means the only ideas. So in Lean's view of flow is one-piece flow. Words, Japanese words like haijunka means leveled workflow. Single or one-piece flow. You know who invented this? The Italians. I will show you in a minute. It's there. So you know the Arsenal in Venice? You know Venice, Venezia? Yeah, okay. And the Arsenal, yeah? This is where one-piece flow was invented. I found this out last time I was in Italy. I did some work for my friends at Pietro Ferrantini, and the boss, okay, he told me, he says, Nigel, do you know about this? So I did some research. But they could build a ship, I think it says here, look, 1 ship per day. And they would use the water underneath the Arsenal and would float the boat, the ship down, and they build it, and as it went down the water, they would add more to it until at the other end, the ship came out. This is one-piece flow. So this is the lean view of flow. But from my point of view, it's continuous value-added activity. The seamless transition from ideation to delivery, which is exactly what they were doing in Venice. And it's also an emergent outcome. You can't command somebody to develop flow. In this case, psychological safety. You can set the conditions for it, but you can't say, thou shalt now flow. So, there's a guy called, and Dave doesn't like this, but he'll probably say something about it afterwards, but Dr. or Professor Bijan came up with something called constructal law. And in constructal law, this is how flow is described. It says for a finite system to persist in time, which he means to live, to be alive, it must evolve in such a way that it provides easier access to the imposed currents that flow through it. And I thought that was really hard to understand, so I made some pictures. So all moving systems are flow systems. That's one of the assertions in this theory. They consist of a design through which a currency flows and the currency itself. That's easy. You, as a human, are a system that contains the currency. The currency is your blood. So the circulatory system is a flow system. Financial systems, etc., exist. And to persist in time, to continue to survive, to live, they must be able to evolve to flow more freely. This is constructal law. See, flow is not as simple as people thought, and Dave will take you on another journey into flowing complex systems or complexity later. So then we wrote a paper together with Dave, and part of that paper we talked about information flow. And so once life is created, to sustain life, we have flow through the cellular transfer of information. This is a fascinating subject if you're a biologist. As more information is needed, more energy is used, more energy is expended. So as we need more information, it costs us more energy. Information value is defined as providing actionable information. We heard Richard talk about so much data is now available, big data, blah, blah, petabytes of data, data lakes, whatever one of those things are, all these different things, but we need actionable information, and the cost to get that information is extremely high. Information is considered valuable if it's available when needed. Logical depth is the phrase we use to describe the time and energy needed to obtain actionable information. So if you've got a huge data lake, the logical depth, a good metaphor, is the cost it's going to take you to get the answers you need. And then finally, the flow of information controls the properties and behavior of a system. So that if you're thinking about your systems, we need to think about these. I'll mention the paper to you in a minute, and that you're free to download it for free and read all this stuff. So let me tell you what the flow system is, since part of me being here is to tell you about this. First of all, it's not a framework. It's a system of learning and understanding. It was never designed to be a prescription or a framework with a whole set of guaranteed tools. It's a system of learning and understanding for dealing with complexity. It's a coming together of several methods to address those things you were hearing about earlier, VUCA, the volatility, uncertainty, ambiguity, complexity. So it varies, the coming together of methods, this is the important thing, varies by context and is counter to a concept Dave taught me, which is universality. So if you've heard of SAFE, the Scaled Agile Framework, it promises to be the answer to the meaning of life, which is 42, but I don't know if I'm ready to get that joke in here. But this is where they try and sell you a universal way to solve everything, and it's just not feasible or possible. So this is the flow system as we depicted it when we designed it. There are 3 helixes. These are individual strands of DNA. They're not pillars, even though they may look like them. We put customer first at the beginning because this is my foundational work from the Toyota production system. So we start with customer first. We flow, as a metaphor, customer first throughout the flow system. So we talk about customer value flow. We talk about we want to deliver value to a customer. We've got a set of needs and requirements. We try to reduce the time and the effort and the energy to deliver that value. And this is how we describe it. We maximize customer value through the attainment of flow through interconnecting these 3 key components, which I'm going to dig into now. We call it the triple helix of flow. So let's talk about complexity thinking, as we've got genuinely the preeminent expert on complexity in the room. So Dave will talk to you more about this in depth. So within our complexity helix, we have a number of things we think are useful, including work that Dave has developed, Cynefin framework and sense making, and others. Complex problems were originally defined by West Churchman in 1967, having these 3 key types of problems. Simple problems, complex problems, and what he called wicked problems. There's a definition there. You will get a copy of these slides after the presentation. Dave then developed the Cynefin framework. And this word Cynefin, which is here, this is how you pronounce it, Cynefin, and it actually means habitat. But essentially there are 5 domains which help us make sense of where we are when we're looking at complex problems or our environment to determine whether they're actually complex. I mean, some words that Dave wrote there, sense which context they're in so they can not only make better decisions, but avoid the problems that arise when their preferred management style causes them to make mistakes. So this is front and center of the work that myself, Professor Turner, and Brian Rivera have done. In contrast and comparison, when we think about systems theoretical approaches, we often think about things like lean, like the Toyota production system, like general systems theory. And in this area, we tend to find things are more ordered, linear, or predictable. When we get more into the unpredictable world, we get into sort of complexity theory, where things are unordered, non-linear, unpredictable. I'll try and make this a bit easier for you. We also study complex adaptive systems. If you want to know what a complex adaptive system is, take a selfie. You are a complex adaptive system. So, and there's a definition there of complex adaptive systems. Even in leadership, Steve Denning, in this book, which will annoy Dave, but Steve Denning said, leadership at the executive levels becomes a growing, learning, adapting, living organism that is in constant flux to identify and develop new opportunities that add value for customers. That's a complex adaptive system. As leadership in an organization, you are a complex adaptive system that's continuously evolving. If you want to understand this in a very simple terminology, on the left-hand side, you've got the game of football, the real game of football, not the version they play in America, which we call hand egg, because it's an egg you carry in your hands, where this is a ball you kick with your feet. So this is a complex adaptive system. It's non-linear, unordered, unpredictable. You have a dynamic allocation of resource. The minute the whistle goes, doesn't matter what the position you play on the field is or on the pitch, everything starts to evolve and change in real time. Whereas in a predictable system like the Toyota production system in Kentucky in the USA, this is very linear, ordered and predictable, fixed allocation of resource, but the only unknown factor is the people. They are the element of complexity there. It's important to know what type of work you are doing. The other thing that I find is people say that because the work is difficult, it's complex, and that's not true. Just because it needs expertise and it's difficult doesn't make it complex. Everybody wants to call all the work they do complex, and you find with Agile and Scrum, they're constantly talking about solving complex problems. The other thing you need to know as well, if you're a lean practitioner, 5 whys don't work in complex problems. Complex problems are irreducible. You cannot get back to a single root cause. 5 why analysis doesn't work. And I'm a Toyota guy telling you that 5 why doesn't work in complex systems. I don't know if Richard will agree with me. Now, I've got a little game for you. I want to do a little exercise with you to demonstrate this. My time is going to hell. So I'm going to do a little quiz using Mentimeter. So you all need your phones out. Get your cell phones out. We're going to do a little quiz. And if I've done this right and I do this, then this should appear. I want you to go to menti.com. I'll point at the address. Some of you should be familiar with this. Go to menti.com. Menti.com. And then I want you, you'll get the opportunity, you'll get a question on your phone. You can see it much bigger on the screen here. I want you to tell me what your current day-to-day working environment is. What is it like? If it's clear, this is Cynefin, we're using Cynefin as the instrument here, or as the tool, clear. If the outcome is clear, the problem or situation is so simple that any individual can make an effective decision usually by following established procedures. If it's a complicated environment, the outcome is predictable and controllable, but the knowledge and expertise is not in a single person. You need teams of experts. If your work is complex, and Dave wrote these definitions, all the people and things are entangled in many ways that cannot be fully understood. Everything is connected, but the impact of change cannot be predicted. And finally, if you're in chaos, it's by definition random. Do something, see what happens, and then decide how to respond. If you're completely confused, put your dot in the middle, because that's a state of confusion. All right, let's see how we're doing. We've got 19 responses so far. Okay, let's see what we're looking like. Any more? Okay. So, let's have a look on here. Now, if you see a number like this with 11 in it, it means 11 people put their dots roughly in the same place. But if we do a quick calculation here, 2/3, maybe more than 2/3 of the people in the room are saying that their current day-to-day working environment is unpredictable and is complex, and even 3 people are saying it's chaotic. 5 of you are confused either by the exercise or in your day-to-day working environment. So this is really important, and I'll show you why. Let me switch back to the slides here. And this is really important because all tools and techniques have context. A toothbrush and a hammer are both very good tools, yeah? They both do really good jobs, but you don't want to mix them up. So using Lean and Scrum and other tools are important. You need to use them in the correct context. This is just my interpretation of where some of these things fit. So you need to actually understand the type of work you're doing, because you might actually be using the wrong tools, or you might not understand the work you're doing. Because if you're in complexity, you need some of the tools like Cynefin, like sense-making, complex facilitation, these things called narratives and storytelling, a lot of the work that Dave has pioneered. If you're in chaos, you know, hope, prayer, wishful thinking, the church, you know, novel practices. But over here, if you're in the very clear environment, you know, things like Six Sigma and what you call best practices are fine. And if you're in here, you can use some of the established techniques like project management, even some of SAFe may work there. But this is really important for you to understand. And if you're in this transitional area, and this is Latin, the liminal boundary, this transitional area, you may find agile tools and techniques and Scrum have some value and some benefit to move you from the complex world back into the more ordered and predictable world here. But this is the problem. People are using all the wrong tools, and they're trying to mix these tools up. How am I doing for time, Bastian? Oh dear, that's a bit of a mess. So we call this bounded applicability. That's the phraseology, again, something Dave taught me. Bounded applicability basically states that tools have limits to their utility, to their value. And as you start to get close to the boundary, the cost of using the tools is greater, the benefits are less. So this is really important. Now, let me go, am I going to go somewhere else here with you? Let me see what I did here, yes. So, what I want to, let me just go into, let me talk a little bit about team science. Because team science is something that Professor Turner studies and teaches at the University of North Texas. And some of the work we did in the flow system is focused very heavily on team science. I've actually started to believe in the last few months that teamwork is actually the secret sauce. This team effectiveness, as John will tell you, team effectiveness is the secret sauce for you to be successful in your organizations. And working with my colleague Brian Rivera, who's from the military side of things, he's shown me that if you actually train people in teamwork, actually they'll solve the problems, that they'll figure out which are the right tools and techniques to use. Let me give you a little bit about what's a team not. So a team is not a group of people pushed together. So it's not just a collection or a crowd of people. Teams are not a collection of people who use methodologies. This isn't a team at all. Teams are not a collection of people who use tools, and teams are not a collection of people who do independent tasks. This is quite important. Task work and teamwork are very different things. Task work is about having the knowledge and skills and ability to do a piece of work, but teamwork is this dynamic process that changes over time, and this is where we want to focus. Team performance is more about how fast they're running in the hamster wheel. Team effectiveness relates to a team's outcome, how the interactions between the teams are working. John did some work, some peer-reviewed work based upon work by a number of other learned professors and experts, and came up with the 9 C's of teamwork. And you'll see some very familiar words on here, and I'll make sure you get access to the paper that that's covered in. This is a determination of whether you need a team or not. So if the tasks are simple, individual, independent tasks, you don't need a team. So don't put people in a team. There's no point having them in a team. Doesn't mean they don't need to cooperate and communicate. That's given. But we don't need a team. If the tasks are complicated, thinking about the demonstration with Knevin, if the tasks are complicated, we do need cooperation. There is a dependency between the tasks, but the tasks themselves are still independent. We just need good communication between them. Now, there's a grey line there, but once we get into complex tasks like the game of football, this is where we need collaboration. Cooperation means I'll help you, but I don't really care about the outcome. Collaboration means we share joint ownership of the outcome. So, this is my test. If the work is interdependent, which means not dependent or independent, but interdependent, we need each other to get the work done, then you need a team. Let me give you a few, because I want to just clarify this dependency versus interdependent. Dependent means that later steps depend on earlier steps, so like the production line. If you're in manufacturing, a later step is dependent on an earlier step. But interdependent work requires continuous collaboration, and the tasks or the work cannot be done independently. They must be done collaboratively. I don't know why that's there. Keep going. Right. I want to jump past this for you because this is not important, and I know my time is short. So, I'll give you a few other things. Dynamic teams. This is the stuff we learned from the US military. They teach people to be teams. They teach people teamwork. And then they can put them together and very quickly form a dynamic team. This is also known as crew concept. And you'll hope, this is often what's happening when you're taking a flight somewhere. You want to hope that the 2 people in the cockpit are trained in collaboration, communication, and cooperation, yeah? So, now, this is another concept from Lean, temporary flow cells known as a workflow cycle. This is where when people aren't permanently in the same team, but they're very diverse, as you'll see from the job descriptions, we bring them together temporarily for a few hours a week to work on focused activity without email and phones. Temporary teams, these are bad. I feel that these are actually taking from one part of the organization. You know, these temporary teams, these SWAT teams, these special tiger teams, avoid these if you can. And this thing about cross-functionality, that's a cross-functional, multi-skilled team. But is that actually any use to you? So just putting people as a diverse set of skills together doesn't really make any difference unless the teams are interdependent. Now, I'm sorry, the work is interdependent. Now, I wanted to finish with something, and I know I'll run over a couple of minutes, but I'm sorry about this, Bastian. I want to finish with something. I want to talk about interconnections, and this is really where we're going with the flow system now, and you'll see as you start to read the book, hopefully it'll help you. So, we often talk about organizational and system fitness, and I'm not the expert on this, Dave is the expert on this, but it's the ability to sustain your existence while also adapting to environmental threats. The pandemic's probably an example of that. So resilience is your speed of recovery, the ability to adapt to change. So how quickly can you recover from being knocked down? Where people talk about robustness, which is the ability to withstand impacts. The problem is if you're too robust, you eventually will break and you will not adapt to change. What we want is resilience. So when we talk about agility, we're actually talking about resilience, the ability to adapt rapidly to change, which we all had to learn over the last few years. Now, fitness is contextual. I talk about context a lot, and continuously adapting and not a fixed value. So you can't just sort of say, that's what fitness is. This thing is evolved. It's a complex adaptive system. and it's a component of the interaction among its parts. Now, let me talk about this a little bit more. We talk about using multiple different tools and techniques, methods and approaches in the flow system. We don't have and we just suggest some. We don't have a finite list. We suggest these may work together. What we're looking at is the fact that they're not fixed. We're looking for emergence through the reaction and interaction between the tools and how they react and interact differently based on context and usage. So as we change context or the landscape, the business landscape changes, we also see the way tools work together and how their reaction exists in that moment, but as time evolves and as the system evolves, the reactions change. We also look at affordances, which is the relationship between a tool and the object and its capabilities. So we want to sort of see whether or not a certain tool affords itself to us and gives us the capability to do something. And even affordances will change, a tool's affordances will change based upon context. I put this in because this is something I was discussing in Lisbon. This is a rhizome. If you're not sure what a rhizome is, ginger used in cooking. So a rhizome has no predefined plan or structure. Its patterns of growth emerge and adapt based upon its context and its environment. So within your organization, you are a rhizome. You are not a tree, which is a hierarchical, repeatable thing. A rhizome is short-term memory. It's not a reproduction. A tree is a reproduction. It's a long-term memory. These are some of the things that we've started to look at now. If you want to learn more about some of these things, this is a paper that we co-authored with Dave Snowden, John Turner, myself. The QR code will take you there. It's open access, it's free, you don't have to pay for any of this. Or you can go to substratetheory.com and start to learn a little bit about the work we're doing. This takes me to the playbook. This is the next book that's coming out next year. These symbols you see are based upon a new technique that Dave Snowden has created with the Cynefin company called S-Geraint mapping, where we're going to have a number of different techniques that we think might be useful and valuable. You'll be able to download these, but also buy sets of cards where you can actually run workshops within your organization and start to look at the different techniques, the different methods, approaches, and how they may work together and how they may be valuable within a certain context. I'll give you a copy of these slides so you have them. This is the actual prototype of this being used. Dave gave me these photographs. These are some of the cards that have been produced as prototypes by the Cynefin company. And this is a way for you to explore how and where and why certain tools and techniques may be valuable for you. And I want to show you, I put this in after Richard earlier on talked about Genshi Genbutsu. This is what it means. That's Genshi Genbutsu at the top. What most of you do is something called Genshi Kenbutsu. You go sightseeing. You don't actually go to the source of the problem and figure that out. And I'll end with a little video here. There's not much noise on it. I went for the last 3 months and worked in a food processing plant in Washington State. I can't tell you who. And I sat watching this production for 3 weeks, video recording it on my phone. And then I said, can I go and try it out? And they said, yes, if you do 8 hours. And I'm like 60 years old and full of arthritis. So this is me working on a frozen corn production line for 8 hours. I can tell you I prayed for death nearly every hour. I wanted to die so they'd carry me off. It was the hardest work I'd ever done. The reason I show you this is because there's this thing called visualization and utilization. Many of you will have tools with lots of statistics, lots of information, lots of data. Jira, version 1, other tools of demonic possession. And basically, all that you really want to, visual control, which is also known as Andon, and in Agile circles, external radiators, should only present the facts. Displays without facts are just eye candy. Visualization. And so I thought about this, and I thought about my work on the plant floor, and I combined a number of techniques. I actually took my own medicine. I combined a number of techniques. They're the real board, sorry, that's the real board on the factory floor. This is just a facsimile of it so you can see what it did. So I took some lean tools, I used Scrum and some Kanban techniques on the plant floor in a food processing facility to make a difference. So look, a coming together of different tools in a new context that gives rise to an emergence, something greater than the sum of the parts. That's what we're trying to do with the flow system. The board was that, and then what they actually did, because they wanted to show everybody that this is actually on the factory floor, on the plant floor. But all these items, people can suggest items here, and as they move through the system, they actually end up on a brand new board outside the staff restaurant, the staff cafe, canteen, so they can see all the work that has been done. I actually did Scrum on the plant floor in a heating and ventilation manufacturing company, so the same type of technique. And I just want to give you this. I'm not going to talk about this. This is another paper that Professor Turner and Professor Rose Baker co-authored. I sort of read it a bit and made a few comments, but they wrote this paper on something that we're researching. Now, this is an area where we've got some, it's contentious, there's some discussions. We're looking into some theories called assemblages theory, and we're taking some ideas from it. We're taking some inspiration from it, because it does talk about interaction of reactions between different things and these emergent novel events. But I left you that there for you to read. I'll finish with this short video. I'm sorry I took so long. Dave will have ample time. Thank you very much.